So Kiley Reid is a recent graduate of the Iowa's Writers Workshop and was the recipient of the Truman Capote Fellowship. She lives in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and we're here tonight to celebrate her debut novel, Such a Fun Age, which recently became a New York Times bestseller and has been optioned for a film by Lena Waithe. So give her a round of applause.
Thank you so much for coming. I'm really excited to be here. This is my first time at Politics and Prose, and so I'm going to start with a reading, and we'll get into it a little bit more. My novel starts with a grocery store on a Saturday night in September in 2015. Amira Tucker is a young African-American babysitter, and she's called to babysit when Alex Chamberlain, a white mother, has a family emergency. Amira takes Briar out to the grocery store. They're having fun. They're dancing to Whitney Houston until a security guard accuses her of stealing the child. A phone comes out, Amira's humiliated, and Alex sets out to right the night's wrongs. So I'm going to read from about 3 weeks after that altercation. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah? Okay, great. In the vestibule of the Chamberlain home sat a small teak table near the front door. On top was a porcelain cup that collected change, a wooden trough holding 3 sprouting succulents, and an upright phone charger from CB2 that was plugged into the wall behind it. In the past few weeks, Alex had developed what she knew was an awful and invasive habit of returning home, closing the door quietly behind her, bending at the hip, and looking at Amira's phone. The small entryway was protected by another door that entered into the main foyer, which made Alex feel as though she wasn't quite at home and that she wasn't exactly looking through the phone. She didn't know the passcode, and she would never use it if she did, but the lock screen of Amira's phone was always filled with information that was youthful, revealing, and completely addicting. She never took Amira's phone off the charger, and she rarely pressed any buttons. Messages and notifications would light up on their own. But 3 times a week, she scrolled with her middle finger as she listened to Amira cook dinner upstairs and tell Briar to blow in case it was hot. A month had gone by since the night at Market Depot, and in that time, Alex had developed feelings towards Amira that weren't completely unlike a crush. She became excited to hear Amira's key in the door. She felt disappointed when it was time for her to leave. And when Amira laughed or spoke without being prompted, Alex felt like she had done something right. The times when this happened were few and far between, which was why Alex kept peeking at her sitter's cell phone. She would have just checked Amira's social media channels instead, but from what she'd gathered from searching, Amira didn't have any. Amira did have a group text titled Siblings, where her brother and sister sent songs, memes, and trailers for upcoming movies. Amira was constantly texting Zara, labeled Queen Zara, who would often reply in clipped messages, one right after the other. No, stop, don't you dare, I cannot. Zara and Amira went out nearly every weekend, and many of their texts discussed the logistics. One afternoon, Amira must have just placed her phone in the charger moments before Alex arrived because it sat unlocked and waiting. Alex didn't even have to scroll. Amira had texted, "What are you wearing?" To which Zara had replied, "Slut." And Amira had responded, "Cool, same." When Alex went upstairs, Amira was playing on the floor with Briar and saying, "Okay, now you have to tell me your second favorite vegetable." Sometimes there were no conversations available for Alex to read, but there was always paused music. Some of the names Alex recognized, like Drake and Janet Jackson, Outkast and Usher, but most of them are strangers, like J. Cole and Tyga, Big Sean, and Travis Scott. Alex ended up Googling things like, is Childish Gambino a person or a band? How do you pronounce the name SZA? One evening, Alex memorized the name of a song and later Googled it in her room. Alex listened to the first verse in her headphones, which began with, "Let a nigga try me, I'ma get his whole motherfucking family." Alex's eyebrows rose up into her forehead. She looked over at the baby and whispered, "Whoops." But out of all the information she'd gathered in the past few weeks, what was most intriguing as a future point of connection was the fact that Amira was definitely seeing someone new. someone she'd labeled in her phone as Keenan and Kel. One afternoon, Alex saw this on her way out. He'd said, "Maybe next time let me know you don't drink coffee, weirdo." On a Wednesday evening, he'd said, "Is basketball something you'd be interested in?" And one time, Amira sent a screenshot of her conversation with him to Zara, to which Zara replied, "That boy doesn't play." The messages between Amira and this new person were of that cool and careful variety that only exists at the beginning of something, as you try to exude spontaneity and effortless humor and space out responses to appear busy and even-keeled. Alex was dying to ask Amira about him, to know if his name was Keenan, Kel, or neither. She wanted to cross a threshold where Amira would offer up information on her own, and more important, trust Alex to keep it. And tonight, after seeing Amira's newest message inside her dirty and rubbery pink phone case, Alex decided to make this happen. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to talk about a few things. There is no shortage of plot in this novel. I really love traditional plot lines, but I also think that you can accomplish a lot in a novel, which is plot, comments on social systems, a meet cute. I think you can do all of those things. And so I'm not going to spoil anything for anyone who hasn't read it, but I am going to tell you about 3 things that really inspired me as I was writing this novel. And I'm kind of crazy about what's coming up next, so I'm going to tell you what they are first. They are awkward moments, money, and memory. So I'll start with awkward moments. I mean, I love them, is what I'm trying to say, especially when they're not happening to me. But there's something about a glitch in the system, especially in Western culture, when things do not go according to plan, that I think is really revealing, and I was really interested in exploring that more. The story of a mom, a babysitter, and a child, especially a Black woman taking care of a white child, is kind of an old story. But technology brings a new perspective to how those things work, and it kind of sheds light on how we interact with those things. And so on the surface, that can be awkward in little ways, like, oh, well, she's my daughter, but oh, well, I spend more time with her. And on deeper levels, it's a history of Black women taking care of white children in the United States. I was a nanny for 6 years, and for a long time, my living was babysitting about 7 to 8 families a week and then doing birthday parties at a craft studio, sometimes 7 to 8 times a week. And so in some areas, I got really lucky, and in some areas, it was very difficult to bond with the family, and I got very, very interested in how those relationships work. I will tell you one awkward moment from when I was babysitting. I was 22 years old, and I was babysitting for this woman who randomly, she had a newborn, and she asked if I would be their permanent Saturday night babysitter. And I already had a permanent Saturday night gig. I didn't want to give it up. I said, "I'm so sorry, I can't, but my friend Mary can do it." And she said, "Ugh, we really want you. I don't know, tell me about Mary." And I said, "She's awesome. She plays guitar. She's super cute." And the mom looked at me and said, "Uh-oh. Because I told my husband we're never going to have a babysitter who's too cute. So I don't know." Yeah. Okay, this is good, though, because if you like that feeling, that's what my book is like. So that's good. Okay. I wish I would pay so much money to see my face in that moment. But I think what I did was that. And then she said, "Oh, I'm sorry, you're super cute." And I was like, let's never talk about this again. This is really awkward. As a person, as a 22-year-old, I was mortified because being cute was very important to me at the time. But as a writer, that is such a delicious moment that I wanted to dig into. Not only had my Blackness completely desexed me to her and her husband, but she felt like we could communicate about that dynamic. And I felt like so much ground was covered in that moment that I'm so intrigued by everything that was happening there. And I think that awkward moments often reveal something that we're not ready to admit yet. And just for the record, like, no one was trying to hook up with her husband. Like, I wasn't, she wasn't, like, no one. I don't know why that happened. But more importantly, I kept babysitting for her because I was broke and she paid $20 an hour. And those are the dynamics that we enter when there's a power struggle. So that's awkward moments. I'll move on to money. I love talking about money. I think it reveals so much about our character, and I think it's so fascinating from the language we use in technology, from Venmo, from invites, to the language we use when we're trying to not talk about money. I had most of the plot done in this book, and then I read a book called Uneasy Street, The Anxieties of Affluence by Rachel Sherman, and it was like I had the what, and then I had the why from reading this book. She's not a novelist, she's a sociologist. She interviewed 50 of the wealthiest families in New York City, asking them questions like, do you think you deserve your wealth? What do you think you do to deserve your wealth? And these are people who inherited it, who earned it from other means, and it's very awkward. The language that they use to justify their wealth was fascinating to me. And it's always these interesting areas where they want to even the playing field. You had families saying, oh, no, we don't have like $1 billion. We're normal and we brush our teeth and put our jammies on just like everyone else. And there's so much happening in there. First of all, you made up a number that you don't have. That's crazy. And second of all, a lot of people put on their pajamas. I felt like the ways that people try to even the playing field were so telling and really interesting, and I wanted my dialogue to have that specificity on the page. Most importantly, especially with a book like that, where you're hearing these very strange justifications for wealth from people, the most important thing was that she really stuck the landing. As soon as you are judging wealthy people for not being wealthy properly, you stop judging the systems that keep poor people poor. And understanding that gave me freedom to really depict my characters the way I wanted to depict them, more as symptoms of something and not as villains or good people or bad people. That was really important to me, especially with Amira. She is the protagonist of this novel, but she's a human. And in the first scene, when she is being accosted by a police officer, she says, I'm making money right now, and I bet I'm making more than you. That's a really classist thing to say. But in that moment, it's all she has. And I wanted to give her that freedom. She's really broke. And in one scene, she gets a bonus. And instead of, saving all of it, she buys a leather jacket. We've all been there, rich or poor. And I really wanted my characters to all have that freedom, especially when it came to money. And the last thing that I was really inspired to work with this novel is memory. I don't know about you, but I have a lot of family members who experience something, tell the memory, and then 10 years later, it is a completely different story. It's self-serving, it's bigger, it's more exciting, certain areas stand out. And not only do they tell it that way, I think they remember it that way as well. I was really interested in how memory works in real life and how it could work on the page. And when I was in the Iowa Writers Workshop, I workshopped this novel with Paul Harding. I don't know if you read Tinkers. He's amazing. He says that your job as a fiction writer is to tell the truth. When it comes to memory, that really gave me the freedom to only tell the truth as that character sees it. I think that's more important than how it happened. And I think sometimes that results in novels not telling the reader how it happened because that comes second. It's all about the characters. So that's awkward moments, money, and memory. I'm going to tell you one more awkward story, and then we'll talk about some other things. When all of these things come together with class dynamics, race, petty jealousies, it's my favorite thing ever. And I had a moment that I keep thinking about maybe 8 years ago. I wanted to go on a road trip by myself and see how I would fare. I think I was 25, and I went to Yosemite National Park. And it was sunrise. I had my $25 for the park. I rolled on up. The ranger came out, and she gave me all my maps, and I was so excited. And I go to hand her my $25, and she said, actually, since it's Martin Luther King Day, you get in for free. And I said, excuse me? And she got so red, and she said, everyone, doesn't matter what you look like, everyone gets in for free. I'm so sorry. Everyone gets in for free. And we looked at each other and we lost our minds laughing. And I think about her all the time. And I just love that all of this history came rushing back because it was free for Martin Luther King Day. And so those are the moments I try to put into my writing. My favorite feeling ever is when I should really go to bed and I'm like, oh, just one more chapter. So that's what I tried to do here. And I really hope you enjoy it. Thank you so much. I will take some questions if you have them. Yeah. Oh, that was easy.
So
Okay.
before the questions,
Yes.
I just wanted to mention I was just traveling not too long ago, and I was in Liverpool, England, and they have this museum there where it's all about the history of the war in the Atlantic, and the airplanes and everything like that. It was an amazing place. And I go up there and they asked me, "Are you American?" And I said, "Yes." "Oh, you get in for free." And I was like, "What?" And they said, "Yeah, it's July 4th. I had no clue what day. So the point is, it does happen,
That is the same thing, yes.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, it was just a funny way it came out phrase.
I do think it's funny. Thank you. I appreciate you
was like
sharing.
so surprised. I
It
said,
is
"Why do I
surprising.
get in for
Save a
free?"
little money. Not too bad. Yes. Hi.
Good evening. How would you describe how your own personal standard I apologize.
You're fine. Take your time.
It's difficult to put this in words. Like many, if not most, human beings, it appears that finding cuteness in things and people is very much at the root of how you describe how people connect with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find any personal, deeper meaning within your own standard of cuteness, as you've put it in your book?
I think that's a really interesting question, especially with the cuteness of babies. So this is all coming full circle.
Cuteness doesn't end with babies, and if that were the case, I wouldn't have heard so many people at my high school talking about how that girl was cute or that boy was cute.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a super interesting question. I think that in this novel, cuteness actually comes up a lot, so I'm glad you asked that. The standards for beauty, especially with Black women, are very interesting. And as I have characters, white and Black, who come in contact with Amira, I think it's important to remember that a lot of people don't have problems interacting with Black people, but they have problems interacting with people who don't have class solidarity with them. And then what happens is, on one end, someone may not be as cute to them, and on another end, they may be too cute. And they might fetishize their culture, their lifestyle, the things that they say, the clothes they wear. And it's complicated, but that's kind of where I like to stay with my writing. I wanted to have characters that were capable of fetishizing other people, but also capable of loving other people at the same time, because I think it's interesting and I think it happens more often than not. Am I answering your question properly? Yes.
You are.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Hi.
Hi, I haven't read the book. So I'm interested in the uncomfortable places that as you've quickly sort of presented, are willing to go into. Because I think we're really at an interesting moment of exploring uncomfortable spaces. Mm-hmm. And it's coming up in media, the reluctance of people to get out of their comfort zone, and lots of recommendations for pushing boundaries, exploring discomfort. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of wondering, in terms of your writing, it seems an approach that you've explained that's almost clinical. But what's personal about it? And how did you come to write and be so fearless, it seems, in exploring those uncomfortable places?
I know I like art and movies and books that make me a little bit uncomfortable. I've loved scary movies since I was a child. So I think that there might just be like a personal penchant there. As when it comes to talking about class and race, I did come up against some feedback that I think filtered into my process. When I workshopped this novel, a lot of my classmates said, "Why is everyone talking about money in this novel? It makes me really uncomfortable." And my workshop was great. I took probably 85% of the critiques there. And that was one that I really had to think about. Because on one end, I believe we're talking about money all the time. So I didn't want to back off of that because that was a theme in the book. At the same time, that critique was great because it made me use language that isn't dollars and cents. Like, oh, this is a sketchy restaurant, or that was a classy wedding. Those are all things that involve money and give people that comfort as well. So as a writer, the language was a tool to judge whether or not things were uncomfortable or not. But I will say the comfort level of my readers is not a priority of mine. And it just is. And the thing is, I have to accept too, is I don't get to choose how people interact with my art. And that's what makes art art. And it's very funny now because I no longer read Goodreads or Amazon reviews because I like myself and I'm not doing that anymore. But when I did, some people would say, this was so uncomfortable and cringy, 5 stars. Some would say, this is so uncomfortable and cringy, 1 star. Maybe that's my tendency as a writer, is to lean into those moments because I'm interested in them. I don't know. But I think that toying with language and figuring out where to push and pull is my favorite thing. As much as I love uncomfortable moments, I also love to laugh when I'm writing. So I think that that's just as important for me. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hi. So my question's in the same vein as the one previously asked. Because your book deals with such, I guess, monumental issues in the U.S. right now, such as classism, such as racial diversity and racism, essentially, what is something that you want your readers to get out of the book? Any sort of action or activity or thought? Would you like minds to be changed? Like, what I guess is, other than just having us read a good book, what would you like for readers to get from it?
I'll be really honest and say, oh my gosh, that's such a great question. I have a lot of thoughts on it. I don't like to romanticize my role as a writer. All I can do is write a gripping book. And I think as soon as you call a book activism, you're kind of disserving activism a little bit, because I don't like to think that activism can be sold in hardcover for, and certain people can't afford to buy a book. So that doesn't really add up to me in that point. However, I've had books that have changed my life and make me think differently. So of course, I would love for my book to have that effect on others, but I don't love my writing when it's polemic. And my favorite books that have changed the way I think give me way more questions than answers, always. There's a lot to work through with this one, and I would love for readers to walk away saying, Alex is a really complicated character. Why is she in charge of her babysitter? Where's Peter in this? Or Amira works 35 hours a week and she can't go to a doctor. What do we do about that? I would love for readers to zoom out and look at what changes can take place. What I wouldn't love, and I don't get to choose how this happens, I think it gets to a tricky point when someone reads something and says, ugh, that was uncomfortable. I really felt weird doing that, but I enjoyed it. I'm done. That was good. As for a read, that's great. I love to read a good book too, but for anyone to think that they are, transferring power and money and equality from reading my book, that's just not where it goes. So I would love for it to be a starting place, but that's all I can ask for. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah. Hi.
How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
What is your next book that you might be working on, and would you consider a legal? I was asking the next book that you might be working on, and would you consider a legal book? The reason I ask is because in Montgomery County, Maryland, the nursing homes do not have to follow the medical power of attorney or power of attorney, and they are preying on a particular black church. And in Rockville, Maryland, a white judge gave the white boy lawyer for the nursing home control of a woman's estate. And it is a mess, but I think it's something that people don't know about. And I don't know if...
That sounds fascinating. And that's like, I think so many writers like myself become inspired by issues like that and then create characters around it. I wish I could tell you what my next novel was about. I have no idea. Okay. But can you tell me the name of the town again?
Montgomery County, Maryland.
Montgomery County, Maryland. Okay.
When I get this signed, I'll give you some more information about it.
I so appreciate that. And there's been so many things that I've heard on tour and not that inspire me so much. And so this is where it happens. So I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi. I really, really liked your book.
Oh, you already read it?
It was exactly like you said. It was those moments where it makes you uncomfortable. Then you just have to keep reading to find out how it's going to end because you're like, oh my God.
That makes me really happy.
But on kind of a later note, I just was really interested in the character Briar and just the way that she's written with her like deep voice and everything. Was there like certain inspiration from other kids that you may have met and like that really strong connection that Amira and Briar had?
Yes, that's a great question. And 100%. I was really lucky to babysit a lot of really wonderful children. Some of them not so wonderful, but most of them very, very wonderful. And I think children are so much more serious and adult-like so early than they're often portrayed in literature. A lot of children are hard to write. Briar was very, very difficult, but a lot of the time they're used as like a perfect reveals a secret when you need it, or like this very like cherub sweet person. And I wanted Briar to be really playful, but also really odd and serious. And I definitely came in contact with some of those when I was babysitting. Also children, their humor is so specific that it was very difficult. There are times when Briar will say, Mama, some fish don't have feet, and that's just how they are. And you just have to, you're like, okay, you have to jump on board with that because that's a very strange thing to say, but it is very true. And so I wanted Amira and Briar to really meet each other at that point of like no ego at all. At the same time, did you babysit too? I don't know.
I have babysat a few children, and it has been interesting. I always have babysat boys, so it's a little. I feel like their dynamic is always a little different. It's always a little bit more like, I want to do this and I want to do that, and I'm running around and now I'm hungry and I want a snack.
Yeah. The energy levels are so out of control. You don't really know what you're going into when you're babysitting, and you just got to figure it out on the spot. I do think it's so interesting that when you do get along with the child really well, it's a strange thing to have a relationship with a 4-year-old that you cannot hang out with them unless there's an exchange of goods. It's just not going to work out because it's not appropriate. Mm-hmm. And so on one end, I just don't believe you can be like family when there's money involved. On the other end, it's a really special and tender relationship. I definitely babysat kids who had really raspy voices. And I did babysit a little girl who used to smell tea when she got nervous. And she came to my reading in New York, and she was like 11, and she's like on her cell phone. I was like, what is happening? So, I was super inspired by the kids that I babysat for. I don't think you could not be. I was around so many children for so long. Briar, and this is all complete works of fiction, but I kind of put a lot of my favorite things into Briar. So yeah, thank you. Mm-hmm.
Hi. So first of all, thank you so much for sharing so much of yourself and your art with us.
Thank you
really
so
appreciate
much.
it.
Yeah.
And this is kind of a meta question, but can you talk a little bit about like what it's like writing a book? Like,
yes,
I've written tweets, like I wrote essays in high school, but like writing a novel, like creating a whole world, creating characters that like feel real and like their own person and are like involved in these stories is like a black box to me.
Okay. Yeah. I think writing tweets is really hard. I stopped doing it. I couldn't do it anymore. But yes, absolutely. I wrote many novels. This is the first good one that has come out of that. So many things. For me personally, if I don't have time to dedicate to it every day, I have to live in it for it to become something. So when I first start writing, I would write maybe 3 hours in the morning and then 1 in the afternoon. and then do that 5 times a week. And when I was a receptionist, it was every Friday night I would stay in the office and just write then and then do lunch breaks. But then once I have a whole body of work that I can do, I would do 10 hours a day. But I remember with this novel, there were 3 places, one in New York, one in Arkansas, and one in Iowa, where I was writing out the plot and I was like, this is never going to work. It's just not possible. There's so much, I hate to say it, it's like a muscle of just staying with it. There's a lot of deleting things. I feel very strongly about having other people read your work and tell you what's working, what's not working. For this novel, for the first 50 pages, I gave it to a friend and he told me to start over. I know, I heard a gasp in here. It was really difficult, but he said the idea is there, start over. I think most of writing is editing. It's deleting things. It's this really crazy mix of deleting things that aren't serving the story and also sticking to your gut and knowing what you want to do. And some of that is like, with the money thing, I'm really glad I leaned into that. But sometimes I was just like, guys, I'm hilarious. This joke is so funny. Why can't I keep it? And everyone's like, no, you have to take that out. It's not funny. It's just a push and pull. And I got really lucky to have time in grad school. That's where I feel like I have a novel because I had time to work on it. But I will say this. I got married earlier this year, which was wonderful. And, you don't have to. It's totally fine. But I remember when I tried the dress that I ended up keeping on, I thought I would have all these feelings of like, this is it, this is the dress. And it wasn't like that. I tried 6 other ones on and I thought I like the first one the best. I'm going to stick with that. And it was kind of this calm thing. And I thought it was going to be this huge thing. Finishing a novel was kind of like that, but in a really good way. I thought I was going to say, here's my perfect novel. Here we go. Let's do this thing. But that's not where I was. Instead, my query letter said, I've taken this as far as I can go, and I'm really excited to see your vision for what you can do with this as well. I didn't realize it was such a collaborative process with my editors, with my agent, and I kind of love that I can read it now saying, I changed that because of this. I'm so glad she told me to move this. It was a lot more collaborative. Maybe some people are like geniuses in here and can do your own stuff, and that's fine, but I found that it was more of a community process for this novel, so...
Cool. Thank you.
You're so welcome.
Hi. I had a couple more like process questions. Yeah. I guess the first one is, which other writers do you imagine in the room with you when you're writing or like picking up your book one day, or who you were reading while you were working on this? And the other, which you've kind of touched on, is where were the hardest moments throughout the drafting and editing process? Like when were you like, it's not going to get done, and how did you get through that?
Yes. Okay, your first one's so interesting. Who did I imagine in the room when I was writing this? I always imagine my teachers' voices for some reason. I'm sorry, I'm saying Paul Harding's name so many times, but he was a really great teacher. And what I loved about him too is that his writing is so different from mine, and it's pastoral and lyrical and like plotless, and mine is the opposite. And he just met me where I was at and said, how can we make this book the best it can be? I love Donna Tartt a lot, and I think The Little Friend should get way more attention than it does. I see some nods. Yes, The Goldfinch was not her best one. I'm sorry. But there's a character named Ida Rue in The Little Friend, and it's the black maid of this white Southern family in the 50s. And they do not allow Ida to drink from their glasses. She has to bring a little red plastic cup with her every day. And there was something so bleak and real about that little red cup. And I wanted to create that and have those magical items that are so symbolic of other things within this. So I definitely had some Donna Tartt in my head. And what was your second question too?
Oh, just like what were the hardest moments throughout the process, and how did you get through?
Are there writers in here? Yeah. No. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Great. The biggest thing that changed for me, again, in Paul Harding's class, whenever you have a lot of plot like I do, I kept thinking, I can't make this work. It's too far-fetched. It's too this. And Paul said, if you're wondering how to do something, have your characters ask, how is this going to happen? And that just opened everything up to have the characters answering each other's questions completely. I'm trying to think what other moments were really difficult. There's an African-American woman named Tamra in this novel who is Alex's best friend, and code switching is a big part of life for a lot of Black people, and for all people, everyone has what my husband calls receptionist voice. When you know, like I'm here right now with you, but if you call, I'd be like, oh, hello, it's Kylie, you know, like that whole thing. I wanted to see what code switching would look like on the page. And that was really difficult. But I wanted to give my characters the freedom to talk one way when they're negotiating for a job and another way when they're with their friends. So I think those moments were hard, but it got done. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
Well, first I have to say, definitely the best book I've read in 2020, but maybe all of 2020.
I'll take it. That's fine.
I really enjoyed this book.
Thank
As
you.
a young Black woman, I related to so many moments that you
so
wrote
glad.
so powerfully about. And I feel like this is a book I'm going to force all my sisters to read, because as a training resource and just a way to relate to some of those powerfully gut-wrenching moments when you're at a gas station and someone's looking at you as if you might be stealing your car. You know, I don't find that there are so many novels that can speak so powerfully to those direct experiences. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
And related to that, I was wondering if, in light of so many of those powerful moments written throughout this book, you don't really see, possibly because of the scarcity mindset of Amira, her time to sit back and process so much of the very traumatizing and, you know, small micro and macroaggressions that she endures from the start of the book. And the central tension is whether or not folks believe that she is qualified or has any right to take over and like be taking care of this white, blue-eyed child, right? Which is, I think, very astutely at the center of many American narratives about, you know, who has a right to have a child and who can afford and be able to provide the current lifestyle that we think to be, you know, whatever. And so I was wondering if, related to that, you thought her sisterhood, that friend group, that tight-knit, you know, really empowering, but also somewhat tense, you know, friend unit, how she would have been able to make some of the decisions that she made had she not have had, you know, that support group. I personally thought maybe she wouldn't, and I don't want to obviously spoil the book, but I just thought that was something very powerful for me, is the role of that sisterhood and allowing her to make some of those difficult decisions. And then secondarily, I would love to hear your ideas and your thinking behind, you know, why you chose the title that you did.
Yeah. Those are all great questions. I'm ready to rock and roll. Okay. Amira processing. There is this big, very obviously racial, you know, altercation in the beginning of the novel. And the first thing Amira thinks when she gets on the train is, this wouldn't happen to you if you had a real job. And I think that we all do this. Our way of processing is blaming ourselves sometimes. Amira's, you know, falling for the lie of the American dream that she thinks she should be somewhere else when she's not. She doesn't blame the security guard. She doesn't blame the woman who said this about her. She blames herself. And I don't think that she does that on her own. I think that there's a lot of systems at play to make her think, well, this wouldn't happen to your friend who got a free internship from her dad and who her dad pays his rent, so it's your fault. And that's not true. Amira is she's not the best, you've read the book, she's not the best communicator all the time. And I think she's still working some things out in her head. And that's where her girlfriends are a little bit louder. I definitely have a group text of girlfriends who mean a lot to me. And I think that there's a lot of decisions that I make based off of them a little bit. But I wanted to set Amira and her girlfriends up on different class trajectories and that funny phase in your 20s, and see how money affects their friendship. There's young people in here too. Yes. You know when you're 23 or 4 and all of your friends start getting married and suddenly you have to pay like $500 to go celebrate their wedding and their love, and you're just like, how am I supposed to pay for this? That you found a boyfriend, like this isn't my problem, but I'm so broke now. I wanted to highlight that moment of change when it's like, well, wait a second, like how is everyone else paying for this? And where am I supposed to be in this? And Amira again takes that inward. But the fact that she doesn't have the chance to go to the doctor is systemic racism. I think that her processing with it is comparing herself to her friends, blaming herself, and none of that is healthy for her. But I think it's realistic of being in your 20s, especially as a Black woman, when how much money you make in your 20s dictates how much you're going to make for the rest of your life. It's a really scary part for her. So I hope I answered that one. I have too much to say about that one. I'm sorry. And then the title. Yes. Did you babysit too, by any chance? No.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Did you ever hear that phrase? A lot of white people love to say this phrase. I'm sorry. Oh, she's 14 months. That's such a fun age. There was that for sure. There was also Amir's 25. She should be having a really good time, and she is broke. It's not so fun for her. And on a deeper level, I started writing this book in 2015, and then some big political changes happened. And I think it's really important to not romanticize where we came from and where the Black Lives Matter movement came out of in the presidency we were involved in then. So it definitely has a lot of meanings, but I personally like a title that is not in the book. So sorry, spoiler, it's not in the book.
Yeah.
Thank
you.
Thank
and
you
again,
so-
you're such a talented author. Thank you for writing
But you
this.
said sisters. Do you have sisters or sorority sisters?
Oh, like sisters.
Okay, just kidding. Just making sure. Yes, good.
Hi, thank you so much for coming tonight. I wanted to ask and learn a little bit more about how you kind of were inspired by and then developed Alex's identity in her name. I don't want to spoil anything for everyone, but was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yes. I don't know if the other writers in here feel the same way, but some characters present themselves to you and they are so clear. And that was Amira. Amira was Amira from the very beginning. Alex, I went through about 12 different names. She was really difficult for me. What really grounded me in Alex was her loneliness. Alex moves from New York to Philadelphia. She doesn't have her girlfriend. She doesn't have her places anymore. She's a victim of late capitalism and believes that, work is her thing and that's what she should be doing. And she doesn't have those things and she becomes really lonely. When I felt empathy for Alex, she came alive to me. When I started writing the book, I was closer to Amira's age and now I'm closer to Alex's, which is kind of nice. I also really wanted to be gentle with her in that she cares about her brand on social media, which is a really easy way to poke fun at her. But I think that we brand ourselves in a lot of other ways other than social media, but that one is hers and she has to kind of stick up for herself in that way. I'm obsessed with names too as a writer. I used to carry a baby name book around with me when I was like 8 in case I got bored. I don't know what I was doing. But Alex, I'm not going to say too much about her name, but she has identity within her name. I used to when I was little and writing all the time. I just thought you could pick whatever name you wanted and name your kids that. And so I would write about like Black girls named like Gretchen and like no one would ask any questions about why that would happen. And I learned later names carry so much meaning and there would be questions about why your name is what your name is. And so Alex just fit who she was trying to be and this French version of who she wants to be now. So yeah, that's Alex.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hi. At the very beginning, you said you wanted to write an engaging, gripping book that, people had to keep turning the page. Well, I bought this on the 31st and I finished before New Year's Day was done. So you did that very well.
That's amazing.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
So I have so many questions. I wish we could just chat for hours. But the ones that stick out for me was one when I was reading it, I was like, wow, Alex really perceives herself one way. I see Alex as a Black woman a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Do you care if particularly white liberal women reading this book can see Alex in all of her many shortcomings?
Yes.
In themselves? Or are you like, well, I'm just going to put it on the page and if they see it, they see it. They don't. And the second question that I have is, at the end of the book, there's a memory that's shared. And I was wondering, is that a memory just for the reader, or is that memory, does the person who has the memory remember that that's what happened?
Okay.
Or they just, what happened?
Okay, I'm going to start with Alex. It's been very interesting as I was a babysitter for so many people that when I sold a book about a young babysitter. I had a lot of texts from a lot of white women saying, Kiley, if I am in this book, you need to tell me right now. I have a job, I have a family. And of course they weren't. At the same time, I now get texts as they're reading it saying, I saw that, you added this because of that special moment that we had. And I'm so glad that meant something to you too. And I have no idea what they're talking about. I've learned that readers will see the best in themselves. And sometimes it's nice to see the worst in others because it helps you do that a little bit more. I can only write people on the page. Right. It has been very fascinating, as mostly Black women have said to me, I had to put the book down, but I feel really bad for this person. I think that's a really human reaction. And I've also had comments of, this person's a monster. So I appreciate any bold opinion. Anytime that art can bring out those feelings in you, I am here for it. But yeah, I think that I have to, as an artist, I think you have to give up your characters to be scrutinized. And sometimes people like to scrutinize people very much so that they feel better about themselves. I love all of my characters. Because I think they're interesting and confused, and that's, I think, how we all feel sometimes, but I can't go into everyone's mind, unfortunately. And then the second one, yes, about memory. I think that humans are capable of changing the narrative of a memory. I think that we can remember things the way that we want to sometimes. So I want to leave it up to the reader a little bit, but knowing that, I also think that we choose to remember things that keep us going sometimes, unfortunately. Yeah, I'm being very vague.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate
You're so welcome. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
I also really love the book.
Oh, thank you.
I had two questions.
Yeah.
The first one was, you talk a lot about like the awkward moments in the book, but I felt like the dialogue was never awkward, and that's like
great.
really something that, especially in modern books and when it's like written for, like when the characters are like Black and young and just using like the appropriate amount of slang, like how did you get, because I felt like the characters would talk like me and my friends, and I was wondering how you got to that. And then my second question was, Alex's obsession with Amira, like just like looking into her phone and I don't know, obsession with her life. Did you think that, like what was that obsession? Like, was she in love with her? Like, is she just obsessed with being young? Like, what were you imagining when you wrote that?
Those are great questions. I love hyper realistic dialogue. I like seeing something written exactly like it sounds. And when I'm first writing something, dialogue is what I go to first. Sometimes I have a white piece of paper and I draw a line down the middle and I go back and forth. And I do that a few times, and whatever I feel like sticks, I move on over. It also means that if I'm on a train and I hear something, I'll write it down in that moment. I don't know if you're a writer too, but I think there's something to showing exactly how something is said, because it's a bit revealing how people try to backtrack, how to not. And with Amira, I had to give her room to mess up a little bit. Amira has this like kind of tick when she gets uncomfortable. She goes, okay, this is weird. But she says it a lot, and it's kind of like a fifth grade boy like reaction, but that's who she is. And I wanted to give her that freedom to talk with her girlfriends and use slang and also be really professional in this job that like professional looks a certain way. And it's funny because I don't get those comments all the time. Some people say there's too much slang in this for me. Yeah. But I also feel like, if it was based in England, those same people may not feel that way. All I can do is tell the truth, and that's how my friends and I talk as well. Yeah. And your second question was so good. What was it?
It was like Alex's obsession with Amira.
Yes.
Like, what was that? Where was that coming from?
Okay, maybe I'm really alone on this. I think that obsessions are so multifaceted. I remember being in like third or fourth grade, and if a teacher told me I did a really good job on something, I'd be like, I think you're the best person I've ever met in my life because you saw something in me. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I think that on one level, she's lonely. Amira is like a cool young girl, and Alex is feeling a little bit insecure about that. But there is this level of othering her that gets complicated. a lot of things that young Black women do, especially when they're at low income, end up in vogue in 4 years, and everyone else thinks it's the newest thing. And I don't think Alex is immune to that at all. Amira also, she doesn't feel the need to fill a silence. She's a bit blasé. And I think I'm a bit like Alex, where I'm like, do you like me? I just need to make sure. She just needs to know that she's appreciated by Amira. The problem, though, is Amira's her employee. There's a line. I think that a lot of people do this thing where they say, we're having a babysitter. She's part of our family. What do we do to treat her right? Let's make her part of the family. And in doing that, you're denying your role as an employer. And you don't do things to protect your employees, like sick days, 2 weeks notice. You get to leave every day at 5. And Alex's obsession with Amira kind of blinds her to what is appropriate between two people. And Amira's vulnerable too. There's a scene where Alex, I just read it. Alex asks, Alex is going to ask Amira to have a glass of wine with her at the end of her shift. I remember moms doing that with me all the time. They would say, do you want a margarita? And I would be like, your kids were really bad today. Yes, I do want a margarita. Yes. And we would hang out and that would be it. But it was a different kind of power structure. For Amira, she might say, oh, shoot, if I don't do this, is she not going to think that I want to be friends? Am I going to lose my job? And that's where it gets tricky. So I think Alex's obsession stems from a lot of different things. She's bored. She doesn't have another outlet. She doesn't feel like she's part of a community. But I also think that racism goes down that road where you other someone to the point where you just want them to like you.
Yeah.
And that's not really a genuine relationship. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. What's perfect? Anyone else? Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say we have time for one more question. Just one.
Oh.
Wow, I got a question. Hi.
Hi.
So you said names mean things. Kylie?
You know what my name means? It means boomerang in Aborigine. Yeah. Boom. That's all I know. My last name means red, and my middle name means star. So boomerang.
Red Star.
Red Star. What's your name?
Scott.
What does your name mean?
Scott.
Okay.
I'm assuming that's all it is.
I don't know. We'll find out. I do. Thank you. I appreciate you asking that. That was a really good ending question. Thank you so much. It's been lovely. Thank you. Yeah.